I am the least favored faux heiress of a prestigious family. Following the directives of the system with reckless abandon, my family's reactions remain as indifferent as chrysanthemums. Until one fateful day, as I prepared to smash my brother's luxurious car, I overheard him speaking quietly with the butler. Qianqian intends to vandalize the vehicle, place the most expensive one in the most conspicuous location. I stood there, utterly dumbfounded. As my heavy hammer descended, my brother's stock skyrocketed by a staggering 100 billion. Turning around to place my father's treasured tea cake into the fish tank, I stumbled upon a recent list of exquisite teas he had purchased. The very next day, 10 crates of rare teas were airlifted to my residence. Rumor has it that I am the child of fortune. Mystical masters have come to my home, seeking to take me as their disciple. I have become the foremost disciple of metaphysics. Tycoons of the business realm, the world's richest, and the elite from royal households across nations are seeking my fortune-telling services. I truly cannot divine. Esteemed one, you possess the ability. This world is even more surreal than I could have ever imagined. As I opened my eyes, a cacophony of voices reverberated within my mind, an incessant clamor that disrupted my peace. I was aware of my identity, yet my past remained shrouded in obscurity, akin to a blank canvas. It seemed that, according to the directives, I was meant to embody a domineering persona. With this thought, I abruptly threw off the covers and, donning my slippers, descended the staircase. My father sat below, sipping tea and casting a glance in my direction, while my mother, with a beaming smile, pushed a plate of dishes toward me at the dining table. I furrowed my brow at the lavish spread before me. A sudden wave of nausea washing over me. After all, I was the malevolent supporting character. My actions were hardly surprising. In a fit of disdain, I swept the food off the table, surveying my surroundings with an air of discontent. I demanded the freshest milk, neither scalding hot nor chillingly cold, and toast, slightly burnt at the edges. My mother paused in disbelief, glancing at the young man seated at the table, my brother, Qinjun. He set down his phone, scrutinizing me intently. I crossed my arms and raised my chin defiantly. I would only eat this for breakfast. I had no appetite for the dishes you prepared. Time ticked by, and soon, laughter erupted among the three of them. My mother hurriedly waved at Aunt Li. Did you hear? Miss Qianqian wants this. Hurry and prepare it. Their laughter instilled a sense of dread within me. Was I not domineering enough? I scanned the room and, feigning nonchalance, plopped onto the sofa. A new, luxurious pair of sunglasses shattered beneath me. Stunned, I rose, unable to feign indignation. Chun-Jun leisurely sipped his coffee, not bothering to lift his gaze as he muttered, "It's nothing." My mother busied herself in the kitchen alongside Aunt Li, while my father remained composed, sipping tea with a steady hand holding the newspaper. The sight of the shattered sunglasses pained me. If memory served me right, they were worth at least 1,000. Noticing their unperturbed reactions, I returned to my seat, sipping water devoid of any emotional fluctuation. The voices in my mind quieted, yet my consciousness grew increasingly heavy, akin to a drowning soul adrift in an endless sea. 2. Even if I were immensely wealthy, I still had to attend school. Before I could cross the threshold of the classroom, I was encircled by a throng of eager peers. Qianqian, you're back. Qianqian, during your absence, Li Shui gravitated towards Su Shang, but we set her straight. Qianqian, are you feeling any better? Qianqian. The din gave me a headache, prompting me to wave my hand, silencing them instantly. I tossed my designer handbag onto the table, attempting to gather my thoughts. According to my recollections, Su Shang was to be my fiancé, while Li Shui was a top-performing student from a less fortunate background. Clearly, Su Shang was not a virtuous character. I noticed Li Shui's fingers gripping a pen, turning slightly pale. She was afraid of me. I crossed my legs, twirling a pen thoughtfully, fixating my gaze upon her. The onlookers exchanged glances between me and Li Shui, yet no one dared to speak. Su Shang entered the classroom and, upon spotting me, paused momentarily before rushing over with delight. Qianqian, you. I interrupted him, asserting, my presence here is proof of my return. I don't need to be reminded of it. Su Shang's appearance was forgivable, but his character was not. He resembled someone who was merely jesting. His gaze drifted toward Li Shui, and the expressions of those around us grew increasingly ambiguous. I stood abruptly and approached Li Shui. who was surrounded by onlookers anticipating a spectacle. I swiftly overturned Su Shang's desk. Who taught you to regard girls with such eyes? If your vision is impaired, seek treatment. Su Shang stood frozen, his lips moving soundlessly. I removed my jacket and draped it over Li Shue's shoulders, leaning in to whisper, "You needn't endure such pranks any longer." I settled into a chair, crossing my fair legs and calmly sipping from my thermos. If anyone dares to bully Li Shui again, they are bullying me. Who spilled red paint on her chair? Please, why must the malicious supporting character always target the protagonist? If memory serves, this protagonist has done nothing wrong and ultimately fell victim to Su Shang's manipulation. Even my wealthy and handsome brother pales in comparison to him. A harmonious ending like this is, quite frankly, unbearable to witness. Su Shang regained his composure, grinning broadly as he attempted to mediate. We're all classmates. We should coexist harmoniously. He was well aware that the Su family could not thrive without the Qin family as support. I gazed listlessly out the window at two sparrows chasing one another, oblivious to the faint blush adorning Li Shue's ears. 3. Li Shui tightened her grip on her sleeves and pushed her battered bicycle forward. The sunset elongated her shadow. As I prepared to greet her, I noticed Su Shang trailing behind with 5 or 6 others, their demeanor utterly repugnant, resembling a swarm of persistent flies. Should I go or stay? Logically, I had no obligation to wade through this murky water. Yet, could I truly walk away unbothered? I incessantly reminded myself that I was a malicious supporting character, urging myself not to interfere in the protagonist's affairs. However, I found myself unable to comply. Li Shui, as a top student, deserved a future brimming with brilliance, not one where she was confined within a villa, reduced to being Su Shang's accessory, relegated to a mere vessel for procreation. Just as she was about to turn into an alley, I seized her wrist, swiftly removing my jacket. I then clumsily began to tug at her clothing.
Li Shui,
Startled by my actions, blushed, resembling a timid rabbit. Her slender fingers pressed against mine, the coldness of her touch sending shivers through me. And what about you? What will you do? I realized then that Li Shui was fully aware of everything, yet she could only choose to acquiesce. I mustered a smile. In my memories, I had always been neglected, a child without care. The malevolent supporting character, deserving of her fate. Rest assured, I am from the Qin family. With 100 of Su Shang's bravado, he wouldn't dare. What a farce. Before Li Shui could escape, I was struck and collapsed to the ground. Pain surged through my knees and elbows. Upon opening my eyes, I found myself in a dim, cramped room cluttered with odds and ends. I staggered to rise, only to discover my hands and feet were bound. Su Shang approached me slowly, holding a syringe. He spat disdainfully. To be honest, a person like you being the male lead makes me nauseous. Aren't you supposed to be untouchable? Aren't you the only daughter of the Qin family? After today, let us see who besides the Su family would dare to claim you. Originally intended for that wretched girl, I never expected you would walk willingly into this trap. Do not blame me for my ruthlessness. As he spoke, he began to unbuckle his belt. In that moment of disorientation, I found myself thinking that even if no one came to my rescue, perhaps as a wicked supporting character, I deserved this fate. As his hand drew nearer, pain radiated from my forearm, and I found myself holding my breath. So be it. Dying for the protagonist's sake would, in the end, spare me from harsh condemnation. But right now, I bit down hard on Su Shang's arm. I refused to perish meekly after having been so arrogant for so long. Chun Qianqian. I stiffly twisted my neck back, and in the fleeting moment before consciousness slipped away, I beheld, for the first time, my ever-proud brother displaying a look of anxiety. Alas, it must be a hallucination. Chun Jun swiftly shed his suit jacket and draped it over my shoulders, then delivered a sharp kick to Su Shang's chest. If anything were to happen to Qian, you won't get away with it. He cradled me in his arms, his movements gentle and cautious, as if I were a fragile treasure. My awareness was hazy, resembling a solitary traveler wandering through a dense, mist-laden forest. Alone, even my breaths were tinged with a bitter ache. Qian, smile for me. You are the bravest. When will she return? She is my life, my very essence. As long as Qian bears the surname Chen, she is my sister, and I shall care for her all my days. I know who she is at a glance. Spare me your cold algorithms when attempting to deduce the emotions of humanity. Who is born as the wicked supporting character, after all? My mind was inundated with voices, clamorous enough to disturb even my unconsciousness. I could not comprehend their words. If I am not myself, then who am I? Slowly, I opened my eyes, my head heavy as if filled with lead, and I could only roll my eyes about the hospital room. To my astonishment, Chen father, Chen mother, and Chen Jun were all gathered at my bedside, their faces alight with joy upon my awakening. My parents hastily summoned a doctor, and even Chen Jun set aside his laptop. How do you feel? Is there any discomfort? I gently shook my head, only to hear Chen father's furious voice erupt. My daughter, I wouldn't harm a hair on her head even if she played with my cherished tea cakes. That Su family is worth less than a single tea cake. How dare he? The familiar electronic voice from my memories seemed to resurface, this time imbued with a hint of confusion beneath its steady tone. This reaction was unexpected. Why would it be so? According to the previous protocol, Chen father would not allow the Su family to go bankrupt. Previous protocol? I propped myself up with suspicion, only to hear the sound of Chen Jun snapping his laptop shut. The Su family's financial chain has already collapsed. Bankruptcy is a foregone conclusion. I gasped in shock. Could it be that the system in my head is a prophet? Before I could ponder further, the protagonist, Li Shui, stood at the door in her faded school uniform, clutching a bouquet of lilies with a white-knuckled grip, too apprehensive to enter. I surmised she was also anxious, especially since I had nearly suffered a mishap because of her. Come in, I smiled and gestured toward the door. Mom, Dad, this is my classmate. After Chen father and Chen mother mustered faint smiles and nodded at Li Shui, they hurriedly busied themselves preparing nutritious meals for me. My brother, the perennial second, cast a heavy glance at Li Shui before turning his head away. What kind of reaction is this? No wonder he can't win over the heroine. Li Shui placed the bouquet on my bedside, and I smiled in gratitude. I'm sorry, she murmured, her eyes glistening like a rabbit's. Yet, she bore no fault in this matter. It was not she who needed to apologize. I pressed my index finger to my lips, signaling her to refrain from speaking further. She paused, biting her lip as she retrieved a stack of practice exercises and a slightly dog-eared notebook from her bag. You haven't been to class for a few days. I brought my notes and the exercises you left at school. Goodness, someone is bringing me homework while I'm absent from class. My complexion paled, and I stiffly turned to Chen Jun. Was he actually stifling laughter? He nodded and accepted the books from Li Shui's hands, thanking her before gently ruffling my forehead. Focus on your studies. Even in this state, I still have to learn. I silently clenched my fists, feeling that at this moment, Li Shui resembled a wicked supporting character more than ever. Yet, I still managed to wear a smile and thanked her in a sweet tone. Li Shui finally let out a sigh of relief. She was relieved, but the weight of it had shifted onto me. Li Shui is indeed an exemplary student, and excessively kind-hearted. Therefore, she took the initiative to offer me tutoring, and before I could decline, she gazed at me with her watery, big eyes, as if my refusal would brand me an irredeemable villain. I later realized I was, after all, the wicked supporting character. Why should I concern myself with the heroine's feelings? But by that point, Li Shui had already joyfully grasped my hand. All right, I concede just this once. My brother seized the opportunity to offer Li Shui a sum of money as payment for her tutoring services. And I suddenly remembered that she was from a financially struggling family, likely in need of such funds. She lowered her beautiful eyes and shook her head repeatedly. On my first visit to her home, I hesitated at the door, uncertain whether to enter. Inside was a stack of cardboard boxes piled high. Although the room had been tidied, it remained cramped. The ceiling fan was adorned with some yellowed, unidentifiable fluff, creaking as it turned. She smiled awkwardly at me, and just as she was about to speak, I grasped her arm tightly. Will your mom be making us something delicious? Li Shui paused, then broke into a radiant smile. Of course, my mom can cook anything. Her face was filled with a sense of pride I had not seen before. Suddenly, I imagined her, like a resilient pine growing on a rugged cliff, deserving of a fate far better than that of a canary as depicted in stories. She pulled me to a low wooden table, carefully brushing away non-existent dust from my seat. With a serious demeanor, she pointed at the notebook, her eyelashes fluttering gently, and the knowledge from the book seemed to spring to life. I abruptly pressed down on the book and looked up at her. What do you want to be when you grow up? Li Shui froze for a moment, her cheeks, ears, and neck blooming with a rosy hue. Her voice soft as a feather brushing against the heart, yet unwavering. I had never seen her so resolute. A lawyer. The sunlight streamed through the window, illuminating her hair with a radiant glow. All right, I replied, lowering my head to pick up a pen and scribble on the paper, echoing her words. If we are still friends in the future, can I hire you as my legal advisor? It was as if the moment a dream was planted. It was met with unwavering trust. Li Shui did not respond to the latter part of my statement, but simply marked a check on my paper with a red pen. We will always be friends if you wish. My 18th birthday coincided with my brother's 20th, and our parents were in perfect agreement. They planned to throw us a splendid and lavish birthday celebration. When I glanced at my brother for help, he nodded approvingly. He even suggested commissioning 10 custom haute couture dresses for me. I would have preferred not to look at him at all. Strangely, despite having spent so much time here, I had yet to encounter any plot that required my wickedness. The electronic voice in my mind repeatedly reminded me that if my character fell apart, I would face death. Yet, I truly could not bear it. The family that should have been strangers until now had inexplicably forged a bond of blood and flesh. Thus, I resolved to stir up trouble once more. Who would wish to wreak havoc on their own 18th birthday if they had a choice? The guests were laughing and chatting. The standards and arrangements were exceedingly high. A grand crystal chandelier hung above, casting a kaleidoscope of colors. I stood amidst the crowd in a pink tulle dress, everyone smiling and nodding in my direction. I gracefully placed my hand on my brother's arm, allowing Qin to lead me to the elevated platform on the second floor. He handed me the knife meant for slicing the cake, his smile encouraging me to proceed. No one wished to ruin our birthday celebration, so I clenched my fists tightly. In my clumsiness, I stumbled and fell onto the towering cake. Gasps of astonishment erupted from the guests below, and chaos ensued on the first floor. I knew I had utterly lost my dignity. I staggered, too ashamed to lift my gaze, my nails digging painfully into my flesh. A mere distraction from the bitterness gnawing at my heart. I had ruined everything. Qin gracefully knelt before me, gently grasping my shoulders. His voice was as soft as a whisper, yet he enveloped me in his embrace. The usually fastidious Qin disregarded the cream smeared all over him, using one hand to tuck a stray lock of hair behind my ear. Do not be afraid. I am here. Do not be afraid. Nothing can tear our family apart. I knew, as he did, that it was not intentional. I raised my head, my voice choked with emotion, as Qin tenderly wiped away my tears with his fingertip. Brother. I had an inkling that Qin was privy to something, yet I remained in the dark. His tone was resolute, even tinged with an air of threat, though it was not directed at me. We shall never leave you alone. If need be, we will die together. The voices in my mind grew increasingly uncontrollable, compelling me to do things I was reluctant to pursue. Perhaps it was Qin's words at the birthday banquet that instilled a profound fear within the system. In any case, I felt as though I were sharing my body with another. Confronted with Li Shui's unwavering trust, my darker inclinations found no refuge. We attended school together, and although I tried to distance myself from her, Li Shui stubbornly clung to my hand as if she were oblivious to the intricacies of human relationships. What is wrong? Are we not friends? She asked. It was precisely because of this friendship that I feared causing her harm. Yet it seemed that the more I worried, the more inevitable the outcome became. Once again, I was cast out of my own body, relegated to the role of a mere observer of my own actions. Li Shui continued to hold my hand steadfastly. However, in an instant, as she turned, I struck her, rendering her unconscious. My spirit was on the brink of being torn apart by this internal struggle, yet I was powerless to intervene. On the elevated terrace, the wind brushed against my cheek. Li Shui was tied to the railing, her eyes gazing at me with an unsettling calmness. There was no turbulence, no disappointment, no resentment, just an absence of emotion. I grasped my phone and dialed Qin's number. I sought rescue, yet what escaped my lips was, in 10 minutes, the terrace of the villa in the suburbs. If you do not appear, Li Shui will die. My voice trembled with fear. I was terrified that this incident would lead my brother to no longer recognize me. There could scarcely be anyone in the world as cold-hearted as I. Why must your presence draw everyone to revolve around you? I tightened my grip on Li Shue's neck and struck her hard across the face, even though this was far from my intent. Li Shue looked at me with unwavering calm, her gaze penetrating deep into my heart. She likely knew that it was not truly me. I trusted her, as one would trust oneself. I understood that, as the malicious female antagonist, the protagonist always emerged unscathed from perilous situations. When Chun Jun rushed in, I was frantically trying to push Li Shue's head over the railing. My brother was in a state of panic, sweat beading on his brow as he desperately attempted to unlock the door. Yet it was futile. I had secured the door from the inside. A bruise was forming around Li Shue's neck where it pressed against the railing. This could not continue. As everything had originated from me, I resolved to bring it all to an end. Summoning every last ounce of strength, I forcefully shoved Li Shue backward. In my brother's and Li Shue's eyes, I climbed over the railing and slowly closed my eyes. A sensation of weightlessness enveloped me. Perhaps this would finally conclude the torment of being a puppet in others' lives. It was long overdue. A scent reminiscent of disinfectant filled my nostrils. The rhythmic beeping of machines echoed in my ears. Something seemed to be collapsing within my mind, shattering and disintegrating. In a daze, I often heard conversations that seemed to drift past me. The content of those dialogues revolved around disbelief. How could this happen? She is clearly the least favored false heiress of a wealthy family. This cannot be. Memories flickered back to years ago, the day Qin Jun first obtained his driver's license, eager to take me to an amusement park. That was perhaps the happiest day of my life, yet on our return, an out-of-control vehicle barreled towards us. From that moment on, my consciousness often drifted outside my body, witnessing a stranger commandeering my actions, performing deeds I would never have undertaken. I yearned to scream, to reclaim everything, yet I felt imprisoned within a transparent box. I could not prove that this person was not me. Each day, I was reminded repeatedly that I was the malevolent supporting character in a story, merely a stepping stone for the protagonists. Before I returned to my body, it felt as though I had died 69 times. The calls around me grew increasingly insistent, my parents' voices becoming clearer. They were still waiting for me. There were others waiting as well. Suddenly, I opened my eyes, gasping for air as if awakening from a nightmare. They looked at me, each silent, yet their eyes held a glimmer of hope. Mom, Dad, brother, I'm sorry. I struggled to sit up, but Chun Jun gently pressed me back down. It's wonderful. You've returned. I mustered a weak smile. Yes, the one who has returned is indeed me. I had never been the unloved true heiress. Those who sought to replace me and rewrite my life were the truly unworthy. Lying in the hospital bed, a bouquet of lilies rested on my bedside table. I knew Li Shue had visited. The room was pristine and orderly, and I was alone. The wind fluttered the curtains, only to draw them back again, over and over. I recalled everything. I understood why I cherished my parents and brothers so deeply. We had always been a family. In the predetermined script of life, love alone could take root and flourish. Only love could shatter all constraints. They loved me silently within the confines of that scripted life, waiting for me, time and again. As I pondered this, the door to the hospital room swung open. A figure stepped forward, followed closely by my family. Chun Jun held a small birthday cake, with my father and mother behind him and Li Shue silently trailing in their wake. The candles on the cake flickered and danced. Pink frosting adorned the cake, forming the number 18. Happy birthday to you, happy birthday to you, happy birthday to you. I smiled, tears streaming down my cheeks. It was 18, a rebirth. Epilogue. Chun Jun's perspective. In truth, it was not just me. My parents had long sensed that something was amiss with Qin Qianqian. It was difficult to articulate what was wrong, but that person resembled her, yet was not her. Initially, we were accommodating, believing that Qianqian had merely suffered from amnesia. However, after consulting numerous specialists, I discovered the harsh reality. Perhaps the truth was far more brutal than we had anticipated. Each time Qianqian attempted to enter life before us through various means, we were transported back to that summer in the hospital. When Qianqian was 16, and I was 18, having just obtained my driver's license, I was forever ensnared in anguish. I had not driven a car since that fateful day. My sister's existence felt akin to death. We were left in the dark about whether she would ever return. We also yearned to treat that soul with kindness. After all, She is but a fragile essence residing in a shallow shell. Yet slowly, we came to the realization that repeated tolerance and forbearance would never suffice to bring her back. Thus, we began to relinquish hope, even choosing to withdraw our attention from all matters concerning her. The Chun family, a lineage steeped in commerce for generations, must not only master various commercial acumen but also possess an innate understanding of human emotions. We merely sought to exert a gentle pressure. Our only desire was for her to return. We felt utterly powerless. For this, we were willing to wait, even if it meant enduring the entirety of our lives, devoid of significance. On the 68th occasion of her suicide attempt, I witnessed her leap into the sea. It seemed as though we were ensnared in a terrifying cycle, yet we relished the torment. For as long as there was a glimmer of hope, we would not surrender. This time, she descended the stairs in her slippers, still exuding that haughty demeanor. However, with her first utterance, whether it was a request for a dish or a deliberate act of crushing her glasses, I knew then that she had returned. Perhaps it was an instinct. When one truly loves another, the feeling is profoundly different. I exchanged a glance with my parents, and it was evident that they too recognized her return. Perhaps to love someone deeply means to embrace their very soul. On the day she was taken away by Su Shang, I, who had never driven before, nearly crushed the accelerator. I could not bear the thought of losing my sister once more. She had only just found her way back to us. When Li Shui found me, breathless yet composed, she recounted the events in their entirety. Without a moment's hesitation, I seized the car keys from Uncle Wu and raced towards the door. Cold sweat trickled down my temples, seeping into my collar until it soaked my entire back. Yet, I could think of nothing else. One singular thought consumed me. Sha must not come to harm. She must not die. If death were inevitable, I would gladly take her place. I could not fathom why. In the predetermined narrative, it seemed as though Sha was cast as the fool, the arrogant jester destined to stumble. But she is a daughter of the Qin family. She has never committed any heinous acts. She should have been nurtured like a delicate rose. We cannot accept that Qin Sha might perish before our eyes once more. For she is our true Sha. Why should she bear this anguish alone? It felt as though a knife had pierced my heart 1,000 times. Watching her leap from the terrace, my heart momentarily ceased to beat. It was as if, even if fate were to grant us another chance, losing Sha would still be our destined conclusion. I desperately tried to pry open the iron railing, striving to catch her, but it was futile. In the blink of an eye, she resembled a kite plummeting to the ground, while Sha lay in the emergency room, unresponsive. We sat in the hospital for countless nights, too fearful to close our eyes or even to think. Yet this time, it felt as if love prevailed. In the hospital corridor, I clutched a birthday cake while my parents anxiously linked arms. Suddenly, I caught sight of a ponytail flickering around the corner. Just as I prepared to follow, I was startled by a voice. "Hello, you are the heroine of this world. Why would you self-destruct for an unrelated, malicious antagonist?" It was an AI-generated electronic voice. Shortly thereafter, Li Shui's gentle voice echoed from down the hall. "I reiterate, I do not require a so-called wicked antagonist to highlight my exceptional qualities. I merely wish for Qin Sha to live well. As long as she considers me her friend, I shall be her friend for life." Well then, this time love triumphed. Of course, a grand tale must conclude with a happy ending. 1. As Li Shui approached me in her 6-centimeter heels, I was preoccupied with the acquisition discussions from the meeting, my hair nearly thinning from the stress. My brother, no longer employed, had devoted himself to studying the essential skills of a domineering CEO, working harder than he ever did in college. Li Shui had risen to become a partner at one of the industry's top law firms. Her hair remained as glossy and thick as ever, tied back into a bouncing ponytail. In contrast, I felt as if my forehead could emit light. But indeed, it was somewhat luminous. My brother was exchanging flirtatious glances with Li Shui. My vision darkened. What on earth was happening? Was he attempting to play the male lead right before my eyes? I forced myself to look away, yet their antics were impossible to ignore. While I was still finalizing the proposal, they had already made plans for a candlelit dinner that evening. Why should our lives as workers be treated so dismissively? Before I could voice my grievances, Qin Jun strolled over, deep in thought, and patted my shoulder. He gestured for me to lean in closer. Though I suspected mischief was afoot, curiosity got the better of me. If I can successfully propose tonight, I'll need your help with the kids in the future. How audacious. Wait a second. I sprang to my feet. You see me as your sister, yet you're trying to poach my cabbage? On the other side, Li Shui remained blissfully unaware of my brother's ulterior motives. She smiled as she handed me a small piece of cake. Don't work too hard. Remember to rest. What an angel. I indignantly took a bite of the cake, determined to ruin my brother's proposal date. After all, I was the wicked antagonist.
2.
My brother and Li Shui are indeed together now, having officially registered their marriage. On the day I accompanied Li Shui to try on wedding dresses, I spotted Su Shang waiting outside the bridal shop. He was disheveled, with an unkempt beard, standing out starkly against the backdrop of the elegant store. His eyes, however, were fixated on Li Shui behind the glass. I knew he was up to no good, yet I was unprepared for the depths of his repugnance. While I was on the phone with Qin Jun, he slipped into the bridal shop and lunged at Li Shui, who was seated on the sofa in a strapless mermaid gown that accentuated her slender waist and exquisite figure, but restricted her movements. She was caught off guard as Su Shang tackled her onto the sofa. I immediately dropped my phone and sprinted over. With a swift motion, I seized Su Shang and hurled him out. I soothed Li Shui's distress, and she quickly regained her composure and dialed the police. When Su Shang charged at us again, brandishing a small knife, I chuckled softly. A swift kick sent the weapon flying from his grasp. Please. As someone who has been forced to reincarnate 69 times, how could he possibly think I had only aged without gaining wisdom? I am now a black belt in Taekwondo, and I have thoroughly enjoyed learning both Sanda and Muay Thai. Su Shang soon found himself pinned against the wall, receiving a thorough beating. Naturally, I avoided any critical strikes. In the end, I gently tapped his head. I, the wicked antagonist, should not be trifled with, understand?
The end.
Thank you for listening.
And until we meet again in the next story.